In a country where the K-pop industry thrives on perfection, polished smiles, and tightly scripted personas, one voice decided to sing a different tune. Not about heartbreak, not about teenage dreams, but about truth. That voice belonged to Holland. He wasn't born into stardom. He wasn't molded by a major agency. He didn't have a powerful PR machine backing him. What he did have was courage and a story the world wasn't ready to hear. When he released Neverland, the K-pop world didn't just blink. It recoiled, gasped, and then looked closer. The video wasn't graphic, it wasn't wild, but it featured something that had, until that moment, never been allowed. Two men falling in love. And not in a symbolic, artistic way. In a kiss, a real one, between two young men. This was not just a music video. It was a revolution in 3 minutes. Holland was born Go Tae-seob in March 1996 in a conservative corner of South Korea, a place still grappling with the language of identity and the permission to be different. He wasn't raised in a household where queerness was spoken about, only where it was felt in silence and avoided in conversation. From a very young age, Tae-seob sensed he wasn't like the other boys. While his classmates dreamed aloud about girl crushes and heteronormative futures, he was quietly drawing in his sketchbook, humming along to female pop ballads, and wondering why the word different made him feel both afraid and alone. There was no roadmap for him. No Korean singer, actor, or idol had ever stood in the spotlight and said, "I'm gay." The only portrayals he saw of queerness were foreign, distant, and often misunderstood in his culture. But that silence didn't erase what he knew inside. He was someone who could fall in love with another boy, and he wasn't ashamed of that. What he feared was not his own identity, but what the world would do with it. Growing up in the 2000s, Tae-seob bore the full weight of double lives. A son expected to follow traditional values, and a child trying not to let the light in him dim. Every school day was an act of rehearsed invisibility. Laughing at the right jokes, pretending crushes on female classmates, guarding his phone from curious friends who might find the soft, romantic male imagery he saved in secret. He became fluent in avoidance, masking, and silence. But music was the one place where he didn't have to hide. He fell in love with Western artists who dared to say what he couldn't. Lady Gaga's Born This Way, Troye Sivan's Delicate Honesty, even queer-coded songs from older K-pop acts that hinted but never named. He began to write songs in his room, recording covers, teaching himself the tools of production. He had no agency, no industry training, just hunger, and the belief that if he didn't exist in the world, he would have to become the person he needed to see. The path to self-expression wasn't glamorous. Tae-seob took on menial part-time jobs, serving coffee, cleaning in studios, assisting with low-budget shoots, just to save enough money for basic equipment. Each paycheck was carefully budgeted. Rent, food, and whatever was left went to his music. When friends asked him why he worked so hard with no guaranteed outcome, he only smiled. They didn't know that his dream wasn't just about fame, it was about survival. He wasn't chasing applause. He was chasing the right to exist as himself. Every lyric he wrote was a coded message to the world. Love songs where gender was never defined, melodies built on longing and secrecy. There were nights when he'd sit in the corner of his rented room and wonder if anyone would ever hear his voice. But still, he sang. In 2017, he finally decided he would debut himself. No label, no management, just the truth. The idea for Neverland wasn't just a song, it was his manifesto. A place where queer youth could feel safe. A metaphorical world where he and people like him could exist without shame. He storyboarded the video himself, reached out to film students who believed in his message, and began crowdfunding with a simple plea: "Help me tell this story." Donations came in slowly at first, but then picked up. Many were anonymous. Some came with messages, "For the boy I couldn't be," or "For the story I wish I had." It wasn't just money, it was proof that his voice mattered. The filming process was difficult. They had to shoot in hidden locations, work around tight budgets, and deal with rental companies who pulled out last minute when they learned the theme of the video. But through every obstacle, Tae-seob remained calm. "Even if the world says no," he told his team, "I say yes." When Neverland was released in January 2018, it didn't go viral immediately, but it spread quietly, powerfully, and globally. Queer forums picked it up. LGBTQ+ influencers reacted to it. Western media dubbed Holland the first openly gay K-pop idol. For many, this title was shocking. For Taeseob, it was simply the truth he had waited years to say. The video wasn't about provocation. It was about existence. Two boys laughing, holding hands, kissing beneath fireworks. It didn't scream. It whispered. And in that whisper, millions heard a message they had longed for their entire lives. Korean media didn't know what to do with him. Major stations ignored him. Some outlets criticized him for bringing Western liberalism into K-pop. But for every door that closed, another opened internationally. Holland was invited to speak at queer panels, interviewed by LGBTQ+ publications, and featured in playlists dedicated to pride. He was no longer just a singer, he was a symbol. But being a symbol is heavy. Holland began to receive hate mail, death threats, messages calling him disgusting. But he also received letters, handwritten ones from Korean teens who said, "Because of you, I'm still alive." It was overwhelming, empowering, terrifying, beautiful. At home, things were quiet. His parents didn't say much. They didn't celebrate his debut, but they didn't condemn him either. In one rare conversation, his mother said, "I don't understand, but I see that you're happy." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a beginning. What Holland did wasn't just release a debut single. He cracked a wall. And through that crack, light poured in, for others and maybe finally for himself. He once said in an interview, "I don't want to live a perfect life. I want to live an honest one." And with Neverland, Go Taeseob, now Holland, had finally stepped into that honesty. With Neverland having quietly cracked the surface, Holland didn't rest. He didn't pause to enjoy the sudden international attention. Instead, he used it as fuel. The world now knew his name, but he wasn't finished. If his debut had whispered his truth, his next steps would roar. He began writing new music immediately, pouring every ounce of fear, frustration, and fragile hope into songs that cut deeper than the surface-level pop of his peers. He was no longer content with vague metaphors. He wanted to say it plainly, lyrically, powerfully. In a world where idols sing of generic love, Holland was telling stories of longing between men, of heartbreak, distance, and quiet defiance. In July 2018, Holland released the song "I'm Not Afraid." It was a declaration, not just of identity, but of creative freedom. The lyrics spoke of living unapologetically, and the music video featured him dancing intimately with another male dancer, again challenging the sanitized heteronormative image of K-pop idols. This time, there was no shock, just quiet admiration and louder support from LGBTQ+ fans worldwide. His courage had started something. But in Korea, things were still difficult. No television stations would book him. No radio shows invited him. He wasn't banned, but he was invisible, a passive form of censorship. His fans, dubbed Harling, began to rally online, streaming his videos, defending him on forums, and buying his music directly. In an industry where idols live or die by exposure, Holland's fanbase became his lifeline. As he gained traction globally, he faced new challenges. International tours were expensive, visa processes complicated, and major promoters were hesitant to back an independent queer Korean artist. But Holland pushed forward. He performed at LGBTQ+ festivals in Europe, appeared in queer art events in the US, and built connections with other queer artists worldwide. He wasn't just a K-pop star now, he was a bridge. In 2019, he released the self-titled EP Holland, which further cemented his voice. Tracks like Nar C and Loved You Better explored themes of insecurity, desperation, and queer romance with a rawness uncommon in polished idol discographies. He shot the videos independently, often crowdfunding or pooling fan donations, and always kept full creative control. For Holland, every detail mattered, from how intimacy was portrayed on camera to what words were used in translation. He refused to compromise his truth. By 2020, the world was changing. The global rise in queer visibility, movements like Black Lives Matter, and the increase in youth-led advocacy made space for Holland's voice. He began to speak not just about his music, but about mental health, identity, and the weight of being the first. In one emotional live stream, he confessed, "Sometimes I wish I wasn't the only one. It's lonely. But if I stop now, the ones coming after me might never get the chance." His words hit hard. Fans wrote essays, blogs, even zines about the impact Holland had on them. For many queer Asian youth, he wasn't just a celebrity. He was proof that survival was possible and authenticity powerful. Through his music, he didn't just reflect emotions, he validated them. But with visibility came rumors. Holland was often linked romantically with dancers, stylists, or fellow musicians. The most persistent rumor centered around a male model who appeared in 2 of his videos. Fans speculated they were dating, citing subtle glances and off-camera interactions. Holland never confirmed nor denied these stories. He once tweeted, "I will love who I love. If it's real, you'll feel it in the music." That ambiguity wasn't evasion, it was artistry. Holland never intended to be a gossip headline. His relationships, whether imagined or real, were for him. And yet he kept writing songs that left room for interpretation, for speculation, for connection. In a culture obsessed with idols' private lives, Holland gave just enough to let fans feel close, but protected enough to remain whole. In 2021, he returned with the track Number Boy, a moody, experimental piece that dealt with themes of emotional exhaustion and being reduced to statistics in an industry that rarely valued queer stories. The song was raw, the visuals even more so. No choreo, no glossy sets. Just Holland, staring into the camera, breaking down slowly. It was hard to watch and impossible to forget. His art had matured, so had his audience. By now, Holland wasn't just the gay K-pop idol, he was a multidimensional artist whose queerness was part of, but not limited to, his story. He was also a director, a writer, and an advocate. When asked if he still considered himself an idol, he replied, "No, I'm just me. I was never meant to be an idol. I was meant to be honest." And honesty became his trademark, not just in his music, but in his presence online. He began answering questions about depression, navigating queer love in Korea, and the importance of chosen family. On social media, he posted candid moments, crying in rehearsals, hugging fans, laughing with fellow artists. He didn't curate perfection, he showed process. But he also admitted it wore on him. Fame, expectation, and activism are not always compatible. In one candid interview, he confessed, "There are nights when I wonder what it would have been like to debut the normal way. To sing safe songs, to date in secret. But then I remember, I'm free." That freedom came at a price. Lost endorsements, missed media opportunities, isolation. But it also came with global recognition, genuine fans, and a legacy no label could have manufactured. As Holland's fame grew internationally, so did the world's curiosity about his personal life. Fans wanted to know who had inspired his lyrics, who were the quiet shadows in his music videos, the unnamed characters in his love songs, who had held his hand when the cameras weren't rolling. Though Holland has always protected the intimate corners of his private life, fragments of truth and speculation spilled through the cracks. The first widely discussed rumor linked him with the male model from Neverland. Their chemistry on screen felt too genuine to be simply professional. Fans dissected behind-the-scenes photos, slow-motion videos, and even Instagram likes. But neither party confirmed the relationship. Holland, when asked in a live stream, simply smiled and said, "Sometimes love is best when it's ours alone." More than once, Holland hinted at heartbreak. In a 2019 Q&A, he admitted to a painful breakup with someone I couldn't love in public. That confession sent fan forums into overdrive. Some believed he had dated a fellow idol, someone still closeted, whose agency strictly forbade any relationship, let alone a queer one. Others guessed it was a dancer from his tour who had since disappeared from his performances. But no names were given. What mattered wasn't who, but how. Holland's songs during that period, like Loved You Better and Narcy, carried a weight that felt personal, visceral. The lyrics weren't just about romance. They were about longing in silence, grief without closure, and the ache of being someone's secret. For queer people around the world, those themes weren't abstract. They were autobiographical. In one particularly raw moment during an interview in Tokyo, Holland admitted that dating, for him, had become both a dream and a danger. It's hard, he said. You want to trust someone to share your heart, but you never know if they will protect your story or sell it. Despite the risks, Holland didn't shut himself off. He continued to meet people, explore connections, quietly, carefully. In 2022, photos surfaced of Holland at a beach in Spain, walking hand in hand with an unidentified man. Neither their faces were fully visible, but the intimacy of the image was undeniable. Fans debated for weeks. Was it staged? Was it a partner? Was it Holland at all? No confirmation ever came, but the message was clear. Holland was living. Not just surviving, living. The queer community embraced him not only as an artist, but as a symbol of resilience and authenticity. But they also worried. In interviews, Holland admitted to bouts of depression and deep loneliness. Fame isolated him, and being a public queer figure in a conservative industry made relationships feel like minefields. He also opened up about the unique emotional toll of being a first. When people look at me, he said, they see either a hero or a scandal. It's hard to just be a person. He described watching other idols debut, fall in love, post cryptic messages, and be adored for it, while he had to measure every word, every smile against the threat of backlash. Yet through all the noise, one thing remained constant: his music. Holland used his songs as a diary, a confessional, a love letter. "I don't need to explain who I date," he once said. "I sing it. If you listen, you'll know." In 2023, Holland released a new track titled In Between, a haunting ballad about an unfinished relationship. The lyrics describe meeting someone in secret, sharing one summer and 1,000 silences, and parting not because they stopped loving, but because the world wouldn't let them stay. Fans immediately speculated that it was about the man seen in Spain. Others thought it referenced an idol he once toured with briefly in Japan. The mystery didn't matter. The ache did, as queer narratives slowly entered the mainstream in Korea. With dramas like Semantic Error gaining traction, Holland's work began to feel less like a rebellion and more like a foundation. He didn't just pave the road, he laid the bricks while bleeding. And still, he loved. He continued to believe in the power of connection, of intimacy, even when it was fleeting. By late 2023, Holland spoke more candidly in international interviews about dating. "I've loved," he admitted to a British outlet, "and I've been loved. Not always safely, but always deeply." He described one particular relationship, never naming names, as a quiet boy who reminded me who I was. That boy, he said, gave him the courage to release Number Boy, despite fears it would alienate listeners. He told me, "Sing even if only I hear it," and I did. It was the most Holland had ever revealed about a romantic partner. These fragments, tweets, lyrics, interviews, and photos, don't form a full picture, but they form enough of one to understand that behind the public icon was a private heart, bruised but beating. For every whispered rumor, there was a real emotion. For every unconfirmed relationship, a song soaked in truth. And perhaps that was always Holland's magic, not in how much he said, but in how deeply he made people feel. As the years passed, Holland's name became more than a headline. It became a reference point in conversations about identity, artistry, and change. He wasn't just a singer anymore. He was a blueprint for what courage could sound like. In the Korean entertainment industry, long resistant to open queerness, Holland's very existence changed the algorithm. He didn't just release music, he reprogrammed the rules. Without a major agency, without the protection of a management team seasoned in damage control, he still found ways to be seen. And for those who felt invisible, that visibility was everything. But that visibility came at a cost. Holland once described fame as a glass box. You're looked at, celebrated, admired, but you're also alone. By 2024, he admitted that his mental health had taken serious hits. Touring brought him joy, but also exhaustion. Fan meetings were filled with love, but backstage, the silence was heavy. What few people saw were the nights Holland spent alone in studio apartments, writing lyrics in the dark, battling anxiety that came not from the music, but from what it meant to carry an entire community's hopes on his back. Sometimes, he said, being the first is a privilege. Other times, it feels like punishment. He began partnering with mental health organizations, particularly those serving LGBTQ+ youth. In interviews, he emphasized the importance of therapy and emotional vulnerability, especially for queer Asians. "It's okay not to be strong every day," he told GQ Korea. "You don't have to smile through everything. Some days, surviving is the achievement." In 2024, Holland participated in an international panel on queer artists in Asia, sharing space with icons from Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines. His voice, soft but unwavering, spoke of loneliness, love, and legacy. When asked what kept him going, he didn't cite fame or ambition. He simply said, "A letter from a kid in Seoul who said my video saved his life." And that was the thread that ran through all of Holland's work. Salvation, not through grand gestures, but through honest storytelling. Through refusing to be edited down. Musically, Holland evolved. His later work, like About Time and Goodbye 20s, touched less on rebellion and more on reflection. The production was smoother. The lyrics, still confessional, now came from someone who had been through the fire and learned to breathe in smoke. In 2025, he quietly released a photo book titled Half the Sky, filled with handwritten notes, candid photos, and reflections from fans around the world. It sold out in hours. The most quoted line from that collection, "Maybe I was born to be loud, but taught to whisper. Now I'm learning to sing again." Critics began re-evaluating his impact. What once was dismissed as niche or radical was now understood as foundational. Younger idols who once avoided Holland's name now praised him. Directors who once refused to cast openly queer artists began featuring gay couples in dramas. It wasn't a revolution, it was an infection of truth, spreading slowly but surely. Still, Holland remained humble. "I'm not a role model," he often said. "I'm just someone who got tired of hiding." In his final interview of 2025, sitting in a small cafe in Daegu, where he once dreamed of escaping, Holland smiled when asked what he would tell his 15-year-old self. "I'd say, it's going to hurt, but you'll become someone your younger self needed." And maybe that's the truest form of coming out, not just telling the world who you are, but becoming who you were always meant to be. He didn't break records, he broke silence. In a world that told him to sit down, Holland stood up. In a culture that told him to erase himself, he sang louder. And when they told him love was only allowed between a boy and a girl, he kissed back with music. Coming out wasn't a moment, it was his message. And long after the lights dim, the name Holland will echo, not as a trend, but as a truth that couldn't be denied. Because in the end, Holland didn't just come out, he came forward.